Okay, so you want to own a helicopter tour company. Buy a helicopter, hire a pilot, get a permit, fly tourists over the Grand Canyon for 12 minutes, and charge them $300 a seat. Land. Load the next group. Do it again. Sounds simple enough? Here's the problem. A single helicopter in peak season can pull in over $12,000 a day. And yet, most single aircraft tour operators in the United States struggle to clear six figures in take-home by the end of the year. Some of them lose money in what should have been their best season. So how does a business that charges $1,500 for 12 minutes of flight still manage to barely pay its owner? Because the economics of helicopter tourism have almost nothing to do with tourism. The Scenic tour model works like this: fixed route, fixed duration, same loop every time. You take off from a helipad, fly the same path over a landmark, and land back where you started. The FAA calls this a Part 91.147 operation. You don't need a full air carrier certificate. You need a letter of authorization, an LOA, that restricts you to sightseeing flights within a 25-mile radius of your departure point. That's it. That's everything the FAA gives you, and everything they can take away. Now, the aircraft. This is where most people's mental math breaks down, because they're thinking about the purchase price when they should be thinking about the hourly cost of keeping the machine alive. In 2026, you've really got two options for a tour helicopter. The entry-level option is something like a Robinson R-44. Piston engine, 4 seats including the pilot, purchase price around $500,000 new. It's the Honda Civic of helicopters. Reliable, economical, and what most small operators start with. The professional tour option is the Airbus H125 or EC130. Turbine engine, 6 seats, purchase price around $3.2 million new. This is what Papillon, Blue Hawaiian, and Maverick fly. Quieter, smoother, more payload, but the operating costs are in a different universe. Here's the concept that controls everything else in this business. The industry calls it TBO, time between overhaul. Every engine and every major moving part in a helicopter has a clock on it, set by the manufacturer. For a Robinson R-44, that clock runs out at 2,200 flight hours, or 12 years, whichever comes first. For the Ariel engine in an H125, it's 5,000 hours. When that clock hits zero, you don't get to decide whether the engine feels fine. You pull it out and you rebuild it. The R-44 overhaul runs around $250,000. The H125 turbine overhaul can exceed $600,000. Those aren't optional. They're airworthiness requirements. Miss one, and your machine doesn't fly legally. So what operators do is spread that future cost across every hour they fly. That's called the overhaul reserve. For an R-44, you're setting aside roughly $140 per flight hour into a fund you can't touch until overhaul day. For an H125, that number runs closer to $200 per flight hour. Every single hour in the air, a chunk of your revenue goes straight into the future cost of keeping that machine legal. Now, add the rest. Fuel on an R-44 runs about $95 an hour. On an H125, you're burning 42 gallons an hour, so closer to $275. Then there's insurance. A tour operation carrying passengers pays around $150,000 a year in coverage. A full-time tour pilot with the hours and temperament you need costs around $100,000 in salary. Your helipad lease in a tourist-heavy location runs anywhere from $2,000 to $8,000 a month, depending on the market. Then, annual inspections, avionics updates, emergency beacon certifications. The list doesn't stop. So what does all of that add up to? About $400 per flight hour for an R-44, closer to $1,200 for an H125. Those numbers include everything: fuel, maintenance reserves, insurance, pilot, facility, and overhead. Now go back to that $1,500 per flight. A Scenic tour burns about 12 minutes on the engine clock, so roughly $240 in variable cost for the H125. Sounds like you're clearing over $1,000 per departure. Except here's what that math misses: ground time. Loading passengers, safety briefing, rotor spool up, taxi to the pad, shutdown between flights. Each tour cycle ties up your aircraft for 30 to 40 minutes, not 12. And while the variable cost only runs during flight, your fixed costs, the insurance, the lease, the pilot's salary, those are ticking all day, whether you're in the air or sitting on the pad waiting for the next group to show up. So if weather kills 2 of your 8 planned departures, you don't lose 25% of your variable cost. You lose 25% of your revenue, while 100% of your fixed cost stays exactly where it was. The fuel truck shows up every week, whether you flew 6 tours or 60. And your insurance company doesn't care that it rained every day in August. The online booking platform takes its commission on every ticket sold, not every ticket flown. The only person in this chain who doesn't get paid unless the weather cooperates, the seats fill, and the machine stays healthy is you. So where does the money actually come from? Not from the ticket price. The real money doesn't come from the flight itself. It comes from everything around it. The first is the upsell. A professional photo and video package captured by a mounted GoPro or a door-mounted camera costs the operator almost nothing to produce. They sell it for $79 to $150 per passenger. At an 85% take rate on a busy day, that's pure margin. VIP front seat upgrades at an extra $100 per person. Private charters at $2,500 for the whole aircraft. The ticket gets them through the door. Everything after that is where you actually make money. The second is load factor, the percentage of seats you fill per departure. A 5-seat EC-130 with 2 passengers aboard is flying at 40% load factor. Your cost per flight hour doesn't change. Your revenue just got cut by more than half. The operators who survive build systems to keep load factors above 80%. Partnerships with cruise lines, dynamic pricing through online booking platforms like Viator or Get Your Guide, holding departures until enough bookings come in so you don't fly half empty. Every empty seat on a flight that already left the ground is money you'll never get back. The third is simply having more flyable days than your competitor. In coastal markets like Hawaii or New York, weather cancellation rates run 25 to 40% of scheduled departures. Fog, low ceilings, wind shear. In drier inland markets like Las Vegas or the Grand Canyon, that drops to around 12%. The difference between a 60% flyable day rate and an 85% flyable day rate on the same aircraft with the same pilot is the difference between clearing $400,000 a year and clearing $150,000. Weather kills individual days. Seasonality kills entire months. In most tour markets, 4 to 5 months of peak season generates 70 to 80% of your annual revenue. The other 7 months, you're either flying at a fraction of capacity or not flying at all. Your overhaul reserve doesn't pause in December. Your insurance doesn't prorate for the months you didn't fly. And your pilot still needs a paycheck in February. The operators who survive the off-season either pivot to charter work, aerial photography contracts, or power line patrol. The ones who don't diversify spend January watching their savings account drain while their machine sits in a hangar. The TBO clock keeps ticking, even when the helicopter is parked. You're burning through your overhaul life doing absolutely nothing. Think about that. The most profitable helicopter tour operators in 2026 aren't the best pilots. They're the ones who picked the driest zip code and figured out how to sell a $79 photo package to someone who just spent $300 on a seat. Now, the risks. And in this business, the risks aren't slow-moving. They arrive all at once. On February 10, 2018, a Papillon Grand Canyon Helicopters EC-130 went down near Quartermaster Canyon. The cause was a loss of tail rotor effectiveness in gusting tailwind conditions during approach to a remote landing site. 5 of the 6 passengers were killed. They were a group of friends from Worthing, England, in their late 20s and early 30s, out celebrating a birthday together with a Sunset Canyon flight. The post-crash fire, made worse by the lack of a crash-resistant fuel system, is what turned a survivable impact into 5 fatalities. The pilot survived with serious burns. There was no mechanical failure. The weather at the departure point was fine. At the landing zone, a sudden shift in wind direction created a condition the aircraft couldn't recover from. Papillon survived the aftermath. They're the largest tour operator at the Grand Canyon, backed by corporate resources most operators don't have. They retrofitted their entire fleet with crash-resistant fuel systems. They installed remote weather stations at every outlying landing zone. They spent millions. But they could absorb it because they fly dozens of aircraft across multiple bases and have a parent company writing the checks. Now ask yourself, if you're a single aircraft operator and that same accident happens to you, what's your next day? Your insurance carrier doesn't renew. Your premium, if anyone will quote you at all, doubles. Your LOA goes under review. Your one machine is impounded for the investigation. You're done. Not because you did anything wrong, because the wind changed direction at the wrong moment. And then there's the regulatory risk that's rewriting this industry right now in 2026. In April 2025, the New York City Council passed the Helicopter Oversight Act. Starting in 2029, non-essential helicopters that don't meet the FAA's Stage 3 noise standard, the quietest certification category, will be banned from using city-owned heliports. That includes the East 34th Street pad and the downtown Manhattan heliport. Most Robinson models and older Airbus variants don't meet Stage 3. If you bought an R44 in 2026 to run Manhattan skyline tours, you've got 3 years before your departure point becomes illegal. And underneath all of this, a slower but larger shift is forming. Joby Aviation acquired the passenger business of Blade Air Mobility. Electric vertical takeoff aircraft, eVTOLs, are being positioned as the replacement for urban helicopter tourism. They're quieter and they're getting regulatory preference. Several cities are exploring lower landing fees and noise exemptions specifically for electric aircraft. The traditional helicopter tour isn't going to disappear tomorrow, but if you're planning a 10-year business, you need to understand that the machine you're buying today may be legislated out of your best market before it reaches its first overhaul. A helicopter tour company isn't killed by a competitor offering a cheaper ticket. It's killed by a single satisfactory ramp check that finds a paperwork error, or a single city council vote you didn't see coming. So, after all of that, what does an owner actually make? Let me run 2 scenarios. The optimistic case. You operate one EC-130 in the Grand Canyon market. Dry climate, 85% flyable days. Strong brand, good online booking presence, load factor averaging 82%. 7-month peak season plus shoulder season charter work. You bring in around $1.4 million a year. After all operating costs, overhaul reserves, insurance, staff, and facility, you clear roughly $250,000 net. Now, the realistic case. Same aircraft, same market. But this year, the FAA shows up for a ramp check. That's an unannounced inspection. An agent walks onto your tarmac, pulls your maintenance binder, and goes through every page. They find a documentation discrepancy. Your aircraft is grounded for 16 days during peak season while you resolve it. July brings a bad monsoon stretch, and you lose 15 flyable days you were counting on. Your load factor dips to 70% because a new competitor entered the market with aggressive online pricing. Revenue drops to $1 million. Your take-home shrinks to under $80,000. Same aircraft, same pilot, same sky. The difference between those 2 years isn't skill. It's weather, timing, and a paperwork error that cost you 2 weeks of your best month. So, who makes it? The operators still profitable in 2026 share 2 traits. They run in dry climates where weather cancellation is a 12% problem, not a 35% problem. And they built the ancillary revenue, the photo packages, the charter sideline, the resort partnerships before they needed it to survive. In this business, the margins aren't wide enough to learn those lessons after your first slow season. You either build the system before you need it, or you find out what a $3 million machine is worth on the resale market when everyone knows you're desperate. A helicopter tour company isn't a tourism business. It's a permit. A permit to put civilians in a machine and lift them off the ground at a specific set of coordinates during a narrow window of weather under rules that someone else wrote and can rewrite at any time. The aircraft is a consumable. Every few thousand hours, it gets torn apart and rebuilt. What can't be rebuilt is your operating authority, your helipad location, and the number of clear sky days the climate gives you each year. The real product was never the view. It was the permission to sell it.